28 years, which is, and
I was expecting somebody to look older.
Yeah, so that's fantastic. Denise has worked at CMH for 4 years.
10 years.
10 years,
Actually,
yeah,
got a badge.
And she's also written a book. It's not for free, so it is for sale. So if you do want to purchase it, speak to Denise about that. And we can put the details online and
That'd be brilliant.
and obviously she's given you a contact card as well. And yeah, we're here to workshop some complex issues. And the other thing that we had a lot of input in the dietary guidelines as well.
Yeah, so the Australasian guidelines in nutrition for people with cystic fibrosis. So that was back in, I was writing them in 2004 and they got published in 2006.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Denise.
So it's a bit like my life has done a bit of a circle. It's I was saying to Vanya earlier that as I was driving here, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to go back and see, some of the mums, and then I went reality check, 1999, probably won't, and Vanya's here, hey? So, which is absolutely delightful. And Sam, physio, was at PMH when I was there in the 90s, so absolutely delightful. And the reality is that in working with the kids with CF over the 4 years that I did my research in a nutrition education and behaviour change program, because what I found at that point was that the parents knew the dietary needs of the kids with cystic fibrosis, but the kids didn't know their dietary needs. And I thought, well, that's a bit of a pity that they don't fully comprehend it. They just feel like mum and dad are always kind of saying what they need to do. And so began that journey that I went on for that. But there was always, when I was at PMH, within the pockets of families that I did work with renal failure and other areas, there were always the kiddies that mealtimes were just a real struggle for them. And I was searching for ways to support them. Then went and had my own children, and at the time I was ready to come back and work, I met up with Gillian Griffiths, who's an occupational therapist, and the insights that she was sharing around sensitive caregiving and sensory preferences just was amazing, and I just could see the potential, and I've become like her, number one fan, and that accumulated in us partnering together to actually put together the Sensational Mealtimes book. So the book is there. It's an area that we've worked in together over the last decade, and people just kept encouraging us to have it in a written format because it wasn't reaching enough families outside of Perth. So that's the really exciting thing. We published it about a year ago, so I'll share a little bit around that bit as well. So today, some of you might be here because mealtime difficulties are your number one concern. Some of you might be here because the things that Paul was sharing were your number one concern. Other people might be here because on behalf of others that you're kind of going, well, I want to join together and understand all these bits. So for various reasons we're all here, but the part that I'm going to share over the next hour is around mealtime difficulties. And one of the key things that we hold really dear to our hearts when we start talking about sensational mealtimes is that we really believe that parents and caregivers understand the child better than anybody else. There's no one way to do things. Every child and every family system is incredibly unique. There are lots of possibilities, and it's about enabling families to understand what's going on so that they can come up with some amazing, just right stretches for their child. So we'll be sharing that. When I use this little program that we've got, which we developed back in 2007, 2008, and it's called Mealtime Matters, it was for families that was the reason why they were coming for us. So I understand that in this audience we've got people that might be the main thing, but there might be other bits and pieces. So I hope you'll just kind of adapt and accommodate where some of these things might not apply to you, but you might think, is there someone that they might apply to in my wider network? Take some of the things on board for in the future if you come across people who it might help. And so that third point, it's about how our sensory preferences impact on meal times, relationships and behaviour. Now that third point is relevant to every single one of us here because we are human. We have been designed to have sensory preferences for what our eyes experience, our ears experience, our nose, our body, how it moves, our sensations of feeling, touch, feeling and touch inside the mouth, feeling and touch inside the body. I heard Paul talking earlier about abdominal pain and sensations there, and how much does that affect how you feel, all of this, and then affect your behaviour, and then how your behaviour affects your feeling, and that affects your thresholds of your sensory preferences. So what I would like to do from this outset is start hearing from you guys. So we're not going to be cystic fibrosis focused here. I just want to really open it up and say, if we're struggling with mealtime difficulties, what might be some of the primary concerns that are out there? So the people that are here, because this is your primary thing, you have to speak up, but others might be able to kind of think of other families or their own family or your own personal family if you're one of the staff that are here. So let me hear from you guys. Yeah,
I'll start then. I'm a home care support worker, so I'm interested just in getting some ideas of good recipes and things to use. But for my own family, one of my concerns is portion sizes. How to work that better in my family. Got an 11-year-old daughter that likes to eat, and it's hard for me to say no sometimes.
Right, so she would like to eat more.
Yes, yeah.
And you would like her not to eat more.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so what's that bit about? So it's one of those things as parents, we come to the mealtime with some expectations of how things might go, and when the people that we're supporting do things a little bit differently, how do we support them but not victimise them?
Yeah.
And encourage them, and how do we get them to listen to the sensations that are going on in their body and begin that dialogue?
Because I have a 14-year-old son that's really tall and eats huge amounts, and her sort of debate is why can he have a lot more than she's allowed? So yes. She feels like we're depriving her.
Yes.
But we're not.
Okay, somebody else? Yeah.
Mine is sort of that, thinking about that sensation thing. My daughter just doesn't seem to feel hungry. Like
Yeah, okay, so we've got the opposite thing happening here.
So she just goes whole day.
Yeah. So what's this about, the one that wants to eat more and the one that wants to eat or doesn't have that sensation of eating, and what's going on there? And how do we, wondering what's going on for her to not have that seeking of the food. Because again, we come as a caregiver to a mealtime and we have an expectation of how it will go. And we think kids will ask for food. But why is it that some kids, but maybe some adults, aren't seeking food? What's going on for them and their bodies and what that's all about? Yeah.
I've two children, a 7-year-old daughter who's got cystic fibrosis, and just the time taken to finish a standard plate of food and not going outside the repertoire, which seems to now be ingrained for several years as to what food she will and won't eat, so not trying anything new.
Right. So when you were talking about time, is that it takes a long time?
A long time. To the point where you start getting back into the habit of feeding and, prompting every mouthful.
Yeah. And so, is this a thing that becomes bothersome? How is the child feeling if they've kind of eaten and yet there's this expectation of more food to be consumed? Why is it that that's happening? And then the other thing you were saying is that, this narrow range, just this is what I eat and that's it, and what is it that, why and how are they feeling that they stick with this narrow range and they're not prepared to try something new? What is it about maybe the sight or the feel or the sound or the smell and is that to do with the actual food, or is it to do with the sounds and the sights, or more the sounds and the smells before the actual mealtime? Is that affecting how we're feeling? You know, you think about when you walk into a room and there is a smell before you've even seen anything. How does that affect a child, their appetite, how they're feeling, what's going on? What about the preparation, you know, the typical nighttime chop, 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 you know, bang of the pots and stuff like that? Does that have an impact on how our kids are feeling? Are there memories from previous meal times of just another mouthful, just another mouthful? And so those things that happen earlier, the sounds and the smells, start psyching them up for, oh, here we go again. And so do they come to the mealtime table not in what we would call a calm, alert state, but in a over-aroused and anxious? Or have they tried to shut off? You know, and so how does that affect their appetite? Anybody else like to?
I have a 10-year-old girl who has always been very, very picky in what she eats, but it seems now, every day, it just one more thing just goes out of that, and it just is getting more and more narrow to the point she's just, and then every food obviously as well takes an hour to eat.
Yeah.
So
So our range is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. So, you know, we've got to wonder, how is she feeling? What's going on with her sensory experiences, her thoughts, her feelings, because we've got an 11-year-old here. So where we've got the under 6-year-olds that are very much very sensory, don't have a lot of background knowledge to draw on, so everything is sort of more heightened from a sensory. We all experience things through our senses, but 11-year-olds, adults, we've got that frontal part of the brain, the cognitive thinking side of the brain, able to think through things. So if we've got a bit of a dance going on here between what have been those early experiences like and how is she at the moment. And a lot of the families that I do work with where, you know, mealtime difficulties is their major number one thing that's going on, we wonder what's been happening in their early life that's affected their sensory thresholds and the sensory side of things. What were some of those sensory experiences? So thinking about that, and then how can we support the stretching, understanding and exploring. And sometimes the kids can't articulate it. Would you feel that she can articulate what's going on for her or can't? So
in some ways, so she just says, I just don't like it anymore, or she's never ever hungry.
Never ever hungry.
Just doesn't like that. I've had enough of it. I've had enough of that, so I don't want it anymore.
Yeah. So I wonder why she's not hungry, or I wonder why she's had enough. So all of these things we've got to kind of explore a little bit more. And also, I don't like it. What we need to discover that is a platform to go, boom, what don't you like about it? So we actually think about how can we develop a language so that our children, our adults around us, so some of us might live with an adult that's got some mealtime difficulties as well. How can we develop a language so that they actually can start to identify and pinpoint what might be the properties of the food that bother them the most? But maybe it's not about the food, maybe it's about the mealtime interactions, maybe it's actually about the surroundings. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Thinking of school time difficulties. So yeah, different lunches and snacks and embarrassment around taking enzymes.
Yeah, yep. That's a big one, isn't it? The school side of things, and thinking about what's going on there, because, you know, what's recess and lunch all about? Play, you know, not eating. It's a very common thing out there with the kids, and to have to do extra bits than what other kids do. You don't want to be different. You just want to be right down the line. So again, that affects our feelings, and does that affect our sensory thresholds as well? Catherine, what was the first thing you were saying with that? So you were talking about the school lunches and the enzymes?
So I guess there's two issues. One is about having different food at school.
Yeah.
And the questions that raises. And also, I mean, it's not just with the kids, but it's the teachers as well.
Yeah.
And the other one is about taking enzymes.
Yeah.
when you're at school, and you know, again, some kids feel really embarrassed about taking enzymes, and so some kids prefer not to really even eat. I guess,
Yes,
at school.
yes, yeah. Rather than
A lot of pressure to eat healthy.
Yeah.
So, what is it? The lick, sip, crunch.
Sip and crunch, isn't it? Just
Yeah,
sip and crunch.
I'm thinking of tequila.
Slips on
No.
slap.
So they're trying to get kids to eat a carrot stick, and we're trying to get the kids to eat, you know, peanut butter
Yeah.
or
So
chocolate.
celery with the peanut butter, but you're not allowed to take the peanut butter because or
Or,
no,
really,
allergies, you know.
it's sometimes food. So, and CF population is so tiny that the recommendations no one else understands. I know doctors and dietitians outside of our team that,
Don't recognise,
Don't-
don't understand, don't know about it. Yep, exactly.
so for the poor kids,
Yes, yes.
I mean, it's a shame we can't just send them off with a peanut butter sandwich.
Yeah,
Because
wouldn't it
that-
just
that's-
solve
that's-
it?
that's
Solve
massive.
every parent's problem of what to go to take for lunch. You had something, Lisa.
Yeah, I've got a 3-year-old who loves to graze. So when it comes to meal times, and you know the snacks for CF kid are the high salt, high fat, all tasty. So when it comes to meal times, it's like one bite. I don't want to.
Yeah. So we've got the grazing happening because empty. I'm ready to eat because children's hunger cycles are a lot quicker, shorter might be the word, and they last for a shorter period of time. So the guideline is for kids is that when they're hungry, particularly the ones with cystic fibrosis, because we want to make sure that they're getting as many kilojoules in as possible, is to seize the opportunity. And like what Lisa's saying is then they come to the meal time and they're not so hungry. So I guess it's getting a bit savvy around that and saying, all right, well, let's be a bit non-conventional. If you're hungry at 10 o'clock in the morning, there's nothing wrong with us heating some leftovers from the night before, which might be a meal, and choosing that way to do it just for that period of time, because little kids are not little kids forever. We can bring in the more conventional ways of doing meal times when they're a bit older. So it's being flexible and saying, oh well, what's wrong with us having, something that you might typically have at night time or after school for breakfast or for morning tea or for mid-afternoon. We can be a bit different with all of that. Anybody else got anything?
Mine's similar to that. All the snacks she has are unhealthy and she thinks are delicious. And then when it comes to meal times, when we're having our steak and veggies or whatever, she's like, don't really want
A bit
that.
more involved in those
Yeah.
things, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that therefore, it's thinking about that. One of the things we often share is, I'll say it now because I might forget later, is that we leave some of the trickiest food to the trickiest time of the day. When's the trickiest time of the day in your household? Yeah, and is it trickiest because it's tea time, or is it trickiest because it comes at the end of a whole bunch of other things that have been happening all day, and it comes before something that we really want to happen, a nice smooth transition into bed. And what do we go and dish up for them? Some of the trickiest food imaginable for some kids. And so we might need to be really quite flexible, non-conventional in what we do and how we do it. We might have to think about what are the nutrients that are at the end of the day, and can we make sure that those nutrients are being offered all through the day, so that when it comes to the family meal, we might be able to, or what are we doing here? We don't want to have anything happen here. We might need to kind of make sure that those nutrients that are typically at the end of the day are offered earlier, so that we can just do a small amount of the family meal so it doesn't overwhelm them at this trickiest time of the day. And some of those foods that are there at the end of the day, we can actually keep in the fridge and offer them the next day. Or, they're safe for about 48 hours if we've refrigerated them and kept them safe. So it's thinking outside the square, and people will go, yeah, but that's the hard bit. I can't think outside the square because I've got so much else going on that I need to do. So it's that sounding board type stuff, and that's what I'm available for. And if you can find other friends and family, is to just think of things out. And that's part and parcel why we produced the book, was to just stimulate some different ways of thinking around food and meal times. Anybody else before I move on?
So just quickly, if you do happen to address it, in terms of practical tips about when you have people in a family who are polar opposites in taste.
Oh, yes, we are going to get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Now I'm going to leave some room at the end to come back to some of the stuff that people have raised now and that you might start thinking about during this workshop, and some of the questions that were asked earlier in the questionnaire. So, what if my child doesn't seem to be eating much? So remember, we do this for the general population, but I always think kids with CF, adults with CF, families in general, we need to kind of go, all right, what's this bit and how does what is out there for the general public apply here, and what bits can we take, and then what bits can we do that are unique to cystic fibrosis as well. So make sure all food that offered is nutritious. Of course, we then go cystic fibrosis. Yes, we're going to have the nutritious food, but we also need to add all these other bits in as well. Okay, so just remembering that who this was produced for. Trust your child's appetite at each meal and snack will meet their nutrient needs over a few days. So we've got to kind of clarify that for cystic fibrosis and kind of go, okay, when they're ill, can we really trust their appetite? No, that's for everybody, we can't. If they're not in a calm alert state because of many different reasons, can we trust their appetite? Possibly not. So I'm talking about the general public here, but we can take a little bit here and say, all right, if that's what it is for the general public, what is it about how I feel as a caregiver, as a parent, that might affect how my child feels around food? Sometimes when we talk about this with parents out in the general public, they'll talk about their anxiety and their frustration and their worry and their distress. And then I wonder if some of the families who have someone in the family with cystic fibrosis feel those feelings as well in and around food and meal times, quite likely. And so what we know is that those feelings can be mirrored, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But one thing that is for all children is that growth spurts do come and go. And so that's another thing we have to keep in our mind, is that those growth charts that indicate how children will grow, and it's all this nice smooth curve, that's statistical, that's mathematical smoothing. It's more stepwise for our children, but over time they'll have their line that they follow. So they may be more hungry more one day than the other day, but what we tend to do as caregivers and parents is we dish up the same amount of food all the time, because we might do that all the time, might we? We might just go, oh, it's 12 o'clock, I'm going to eat lunch, and I eat the same amount of lunch as what I normally eat. I don't ask my body how I'm feeling. That kind of fits in with the question we were asking before, is that it's a thing that we do, is we just have this much food because, and we don't listen to our body so well. Whereas most little kids do. And when you've got them in the high chair, what do when they've had enough? Or they start throwing it. So we have to actually nurture that in our kids, in our families, and kind of start to acknowledge when that stomach has had enough food. Now, some people are more sensitive, and a little tiny bit of food gives them some satisfaction and they can walk away from the table. Other people are less sensitive, and that stomach can expand like a balloon. And some people, it expands really, really big, and they can eat and eat and eat and eat. So we have to try and start to help them recognise sensations that go in the body. For the ones that only eat a little bit and then they feel full, we've got to maybe help them understand that it might be okay to have a little bit more. Sometimes the meals can take forever. Research tells us that most kids eat 3/4 of what they're going to eat in the first 10 minutes. And then their rate of eating slows down. So that kind of suggests to us that we might make meal times we might make meal times only about 10 or 20 minutes long. Because if the rate is slowed down, you're better off ending in a positive note, going off and doing something, and then having another meal or snack 2 hours later. Because the longer you sit there, what we're waiting for is for the food to move out of the stomach into the small intestine to be able to fit another mouthful in, if they're that sensitive in their stomach. So rather than sit there and draw that meal out and that meal ending in tears or just negative feelings from either the caregivers or the kids, and therefore the dread the next time of, oh, there's food on the table, better to always end in a positive. Again, here, I kind of think about the drink thing and just that recognition. We were saying avoid all juice, cordial soft drinks. We just know that that does depress appetite. So with the kids with CF, just be a bit savvy and offer it. Like sometimes you see kids just walking around sipping sweet drinks all the time. If they're going to have the sweet drinks, it's probably better to have it with food so that the drink's just not kind of depressing their appetite for food. If you're going to have lots of sugar, you're going to have some insulin produced to put the sugar into the cells. Does that insulin shut off appetite a little bit? Yeah, possibly. So just try and join the two bits together. So have water in between. Recognising that milk is extremely nourishing. So if they're having milk or a milkshake, great, it's nourishing, but it is going to meet their need, some of their kids' needs if they have small appetites, because it is like a food. Okay. Remember, all of this guideline that's here is for the general public. It doesn't apply to the kids with CF, but you take from that what you're thinking. Offering a choice of 2 or 3 nutritious foods. Maybe some kids, and adding some energy boosters into it, maybe they get overwhelmed when there's just too many options there. But then there are other kids who need more options because they want more variety, because they get a little bit bored with the same variety. So it's adapting and thinking, what's going to happen here? Is it better to dish up a small amount and then the child can ask for more, because the actual sight of a large amount of food or a large variety of food is actually off-putting for a child. And they have a bit of a danger centre response and kind of go, oh, this is a bit alarming, I can't do this. We talked a bit before about what might help my child accept some, there are some children who keep narrowing things down. So I'm thinking about what Jodie mentioned and others about where they keep narrowing the range down. So think about the small amount. Think about, we know a carrot cooked in all different ways is a carrot, but that's our experience. For some kids, it's not the same. In all those different ways that it's prepared, whether it's raw, microwave, lightly steamed, well steamed, boiled, mashed, roasted, sticks, circles, cubes, they all look, smell, feel, sound, taste different to some children and to some adults. And if they're going to have things, they might prefer them one way and not the other way. So it's not that we want to pander to the unique needs of every single person in our family. It's about finding some common ground, and then within the context of preparing food, what are the little bits of difference that are very easy to include? And that's getting a bit savvy about that, and that's what we explore in the charts in the book, is discovering what bits are the same, what bits are markedly different, what bits kind of overlap, and how can we make one meal suit the whole family. Another thing we know from research is that we need about 10 to 20 exposures over a very short period of time, which is like every other day, for an unfamiliar food to be considered familiar, and that's from a sight point of view. Another bit of research tells us that kids need 10 to 20 tastes of a food to develop a like for it. Some kids don't need that, they'll like it straight away. Some of the kids that I work with, they need 40, 50, 60 exposures to develop a like for food. There are going to be foods that some people never like, but you think about it for yourself. Are there foods you eat now that you didn't like a decade ago? Yeah. So think about that for the kids. I wonder if there are some foods the kids don't like that they might like in the future. And we can just join them in that and say, I wonder how old you might be when you can. I wonder if it will be at Christmas. I wonder if it'll be at your next birthday. I wonder if it'll be at so-and-so's birthday. So we can just wonder what might be happening. There are different people have different amounts of taste sensors on their tongue. So this is where we talk about some, it's a low sensitivity or a high sensitivity. Some people can taste components of food, like if you think about it from a chemical structure point of view, they can taste it. Other people can't taste it at all. Some people can taste it a little bit, some people can taste it medium. I went away recently with 5 ladies and because I didn't know all of them, my dislike of most alcoholic drinks was a phenomena to them. And so it's like, oh girl, I'm not going to get away from this for a week. So, you know, they're like, oh, you sure you don't want to? And I'm like, all right, give me another taste, give me another taste. So all the drinks. And then, you know, they're like, why? What's going on here in your childhood? And so I explained to them, because it's something we did learn as dietitians in our training, is that there are these things, I think it's called POP or PROP, is it? Do you remember, Paul? Anyway, it's a chemical structure, and some people are tasters and some people are not. And so when I go and list the foods, it's like things like tonic water, alcoholic beverages, grapefruit, coffee, beer. So they're kind of like a bitter kind of thing, and some of us are real tasters of it, and it's disgusting. It's an absolutely disgusting taste when you put it in your mouth, and other people are not. So we've got to think, okay, if that's the bit that's been researched and it's recognised, and tea was another one. I can drink tea now, but I couldn't drink tea before. So you kind of got to go, right, what's going on with some of our kids? Because it really might be disgusting to them. And some of our kids use that word, that food's disgusting. We're like, oh, what do you mean, what do you mean? So it's a reality. They might develop a like for it, they might not develop a like for it, but we can wonder with them. Another thing to think about is, as adults, when we say, here, try this new food, what do we expect from them? We expect them to put it in their mouth, chew and swallow it, don't we? Some of us go, no, I don't expect that much. I just expect them to put a little bit in their mouth, okay? But look at all the steps to accepting a new food. Now, if we can break it down for our kids and say, okay, I wonder if you can have that food close to you. I wonder if you can touch it with your hands. I wonder if you can smell it. But we don't even have to use that words. We might just pick the food up and smell it when it's a new food. We might smell it and go, smells. Well, what we do when we're exploring this is try and like it to something else.
Yeah.
And we try to say, not allowed to say yum or yuck or good or bad. Try and keep value statements out of it. We just try to describe it. And that brings in a whole new vocabulary, because kids just like to say no and yuck and, you know, it's unfair and, you know, everything like that. So we build up a different experience. And if smelling it is enough and they can't go any further, then we just keep with that level for as many exposures as it's needed. So if it's 20 exposures to smelling that they need, that's what they need. Before they might kiss it, before they might bang it on their teeth, before they might lick it, before they might let it go in their mouth and then come back out, go in their mouth, chew it, and let it come back out. So we can really slow that bit down. What's gag? Anyone got this issue? Some of them, I don't think they're read, or it might be. Anyone got the gagging, spitting?
My daughter does that.
Yeah, okay, we've got some gagging. Okay, so what's the gagging?
Potato.
Okay, all right.
Doesn't
what's that
matter
about?
how we do it, cubed, boiled, mashed. She won't eat potato.
Yeah, so gagging's not some parents will disagree with me this. Gagging is not a conscious thought. It happens because we've got a gag reflex, and some people's gag reflex is more at the front of their mouth than the back of their mouth. Some people, the smells can cause them to gag. As kids get older, parents will say, oh no, they can put the gagging on, they can start to do it. But why do they do it? It's because the sensory experiences that they're having have triggered that emotional memory part of their brain, and so the mere thought of this thing that they've had a bad experience with, bang, it overwhelms their body and they go into this spontaneous gag type thing. So it's the thought affects the feeling, which affects the whole sensory experience. But gagging is normal. So this is what we do with the little ones, because some of our kiddies, they are gaggers, and some are happy gaggers, and some are not happy gaggers. So we have to kind of explore what that bit's about. But let the parents feel safe around the gagging, okay? Because it is a protective reflex. But if anyone has more to talk about with that, let me know. Okay, so working out who's responsible for what. So parents are responsible for the provision and the support, but really our kids need to be in charge of what actually goes into their mouth and how it goes in. Has anyone been, tempted to force feed or has force fed, and how did you feel around, or been force fed yourself? I've had parents actually say they were force fed. Yeah.
Not force fed, but when they've kept the food in their mouth for like half an hour and saying, you're not spitting that out because you won't chew it, come on, you've got it, if it's the one mouthful that they've had, and then they just...
Yep, and what's that one mouthful about? So for some of our kids, that one mouthful's about, some kids are underage and they don't realise they've got it there. Or they like the sensation of just having some pockets of food, or they have chewed and chewed and chewed it and it's all dried up. Can you remember as a kid eating steak that's really, really dry, and you chew and chew and chew and chew and chew and chew, and then it's all just dry, and what are you going to do with it? And you've got a parent looking at you going, don't you just spit it out? So what do the kids do then? Like, I don't do steak, because then it brings in all this drama, this emotional drama. So as parents, we need to be a bit savvy around all that and kind of go, okay, I've got to buy that $40 a kilo meat, we've got to cut it up really finely, we've got to do casseroles and stews, or we can do mince meat, if they do mince meat. Some kids don't like all those gritty bits. So it's really working out why they are holding food in their mouth, what's that bit about. And just kind of acknowledging that for some kids, they've sucked all the good stuff out, and to form that bolus. And is it something to do with some kids can't be bothered chewing? Some kids are just a little bit less toned in their body. We talk about muscle strength, and can do bits and pieces. There's also muscle tone, and that's a genetic thing, that you're born with how your muscles are toned. You can do a bit more about your muscle toning as you get older, but we don't typically work on kids to do muscle tone. And so we see it in arms and legs. The tone when they're just at rest is just a bit more floppier than the other kids. Muscles are everywhere. They're not just what we see on the outside. We need muscles for all this biting, chewing and swallowing that's going on. So there's all these muscles going on. So the whole thing for some kids to be at the table, and it's the end of the day, and to be able to sit up is just such a struggle, and then to actually have to chew is just more of a struggle as well. So we've got to be clever as parents and kind of go, okay, how can we do things differently at the end of the day? How can we have food that's a bit easier to slip down for those kids that find it a bit... So is it the sauces? Maybe they don't like sauces, so then we have to go for more of the collapsible types of foods.
How can you work on muscle tone though?
How can you work on muscle? You can't really, because you are how you are. What you can do is we can set up things to support that muscle tone and practice. So more practice with biting, chewing and swallowing, we're going to get there. More climbing and being physically active is going to help with muscle strength, which then might help with a bit of that muscle tone side of things. Posture is really, really important. However you're sitting at the moment, just do a swallow. Drink water. Thing. Have a swallow and see how it feels. Okay. Now, start to sag in your chair and tip yourself sideways. Now do a great big swallow. Okay, so it's a bit more tricky, isn't it, to swallow when you're slouching and when you're leaning sideways. Now some of our kids' muscle tone or just their general tiredness at the end of the day when we're having that trickiest meal is such that their posture's all over the place in the thing. For some of the younger kids, the high chairs have them leaning backwards like this and their pelvis is kind of flipped out, and so they're all in this thing and they're trying to swallow and it's so tricky. So we need to think about how our babies in high chairs and how our toddlers are seated and how our children and how we as adults are seated. And it all needs to be at 90-degree angles. So, the feet need to be planted, which brings whole stability to the whole body, particularly for the low tone kids. So we need to have something under their feet, a big box that's got lots of weights in it so they can't kick it away. So 90-degree angles, so legs, and then we need to think about where the seat is so that they're not got their legs out like that. So that their pelvis is in the right place, their back's straight up and they're sitting, so towels, to their sides if they lean, and back support if they need it, so they sit up straight. Then that opens up this little passage here for doing that. So parents are providing opportunities, and then parents and caregivers are demonstrating how to do it. Sometimes if we're going to explore some foods with children, we need to do it not at a mealtime table because we come with a whole bunch of expectations to the meal, particularly that we will eat it. For those kids that keep narrowing the range, it might be that in craft time, outside play time, just with their toys in general, if they're narrowing their range, we need to just bring the touch and the sight and the smell of those foods into those environments. So that's another whole thing to discover and talk about in a big way. But we're just talking about meal times here. We've got to keep remembering what the child is responsible for. Some parents will say, the child learns independence and the parent supports their development. So you're old enough now to put that food in your mouth, No, I'm not going to feed you anymore. Anyone have that kind of dialogue going on in their household? Yeah. So what we need to kind of think about is each child is unique and different. Is it that some kids actually do need more help at the trickiest time of the day? So when are the times when we can stretch them and get them to be a bit more independent? When are the times when we need to be more supportive of them? We can be shaping our children continually. So if we kind of recognise that this is a more tricky food and it might go better if we load up the fork, then that might be the way to do it. It's not making them dependent on you. It's offering them the support when they need it, but always wondering when they're going to be able to do more for themselves. So this is about introducing all the refused foods. And so understanding sensory preferences, discovering sensory preferences and what might be going on and how they impact meal times. Think back to your children when they were babies. They were very much experiencing life through their senses. They come into the world. It's all about sight, smells, sounds, touch, movement, taste, that whole world. And that's how they fall in love with their parent. And that's how we fall in love with them. It's all of those things. And the mouth's just not a tasting mechanism. It's also touch, it's suck, it's swallow, it's breathe, it's chew, it's tug, it's squish, it's squeeze, it's crunch. There's sounds in your head when you're eating, when you're sucking. A whole bunch of stuff is happening. We also talk about the sense of pressure as well. Our occupational therapists are amazing when they start talking about sensory receptors with the proprioception in muscles and in the joints, and how we can use that to rev up a child and how we can use it to calm them down. How do sensory preferences shape meal and snack times? I've touched on it before. Some babies and children and adults can be less sensitive and some can be more sensitive. Less sensitive, a lot feels like a little. So they love lots of noise and they're not bothered by motorbikes and washing machines. But the child that's more sensitive, a little feels like a lot. They get distressed by the noises, they wake easily. With a little noise they're bothered, they, vacuum cleaner goes on, they're off kind of thing. The rubbish truck goes by, they're alarmed, what's going on. So it's thinking about, in all the different senses, where is your child on that continuum, or where are you on the continuum? Because the reality is, wherever you are on that continuum of each of the senses, now you're not necessarily going to be very sensitive for all the senses. You can be more sensitive in one of the senses and less sensitive, and you can be in the middle of the road in another sense. The thing is to become aware of your own sensory preferences as a caregiver, because your sensory preferences, your thresholds, influence how you see everybody else in the world. Alright? And how you see everybody else, depending on you, you might say that they're odd and you're normal. Or you might recognise that we're all odd, or we're all normal, whatever. But our sensory preferences, our sensory thresholds create a lens through which we view the world and influence what we notice and warm to in our children, or get distracted or bothered by in our children. So sometimes it's about taking a good look at ourselves so that then we can support our children more in understanding themselves. Your child might need more help to achieve a calm alert state. So some of us may have had babies that needed more help to rev up or more help to settle down. And so often it gets viewed as being behaviour, but we've got to think about how their engine is running. That's what the OTs talk about. How is their engine running, and what is it from a sensory experience that revs them up or can calm them down? So think about this for yourself today, okay? Some of you may have had an earlier start than others. Some of you may have had things happen through the morning. So this is what happens to us all through the day. We might wake up, and some of us are ready. As soon as that alarm goes, we're ready, action stations for the day. But some of us are still sleepy and tired, and we need to do things as adults, and we do things as adults to get ourselves into this calm, alert, just right band. So we talk about the sleepy, tired, dreamy state being like the little VW car that's just we talk about the calm, alert, just right band being like, the family car, reliable, just doing things just how it's doing. And we talk about the upper level being like the race car. And we're up here, we're anxious, we're overexcited, or we're very excited. We don't get overexcited, we're very excited, or we're very angry, or whatever. So we all go through the day with that graph going up, down, around, and round and round. So we've got to think about for our kids, okay? If they need more help to get them in that calm alert band, because some kids do, what is it that we can do to help them do that? Because they need to be in their calm alert band to do the things that they need to do through the day, just like we do. Some of us might say, right, get to work, rush, sit down at the desk, and we just can't do it, we just can't focus. So, we get up and we go, right, I'm going to go and get myself a hot drink. And it's the process of going off and doing that, we come back and now we're ready. And so that's us getting ourselves in that calm alert band. And then we've had lunch, and I can see some eyes rolling because you're also wonderfully fed from that beautiful lunch. It's the lull of the afternoon, and we're just down in that sleepy, tired phase. And that's okay, because how often do we get to sit and not do anything in the afternoon? So have your little 5-minute dip, and you'll be back into your calm alert, just right band again. And if people need to stand up because you really are feeling sleepy, then by all means stand up and have a bit of a movement break. So just recognising in that in our kids, how can we get them in the calm alert band? And the OTs, just to do a little advertisement for them, they have a thing that they talk about called heavy work, and that's that proprioception type stuff, and it can rev up the kids and it can calm them down, and we've got a couple of pages dedicated to it in the book, because we need to come to meal times in a calm alert band. Can't be drowsy, tired, and we can't be over anxious, over aroused. Thinking about what you prefer, what do you seek to do all of these things. Acknowledge your child's cues, make sense of them. We can develop a language where we acknowledge and label their preferences and how they communicate with us. Let them know that you're going to help them work it out when they're feeling like things aren't quite working for them. And I think this stuff that I'm talking about now, and I'm thinking as I'm talking about how it applies to the kids with cystic fibrosis, how do they feel at school when they have got their enzymes to have and when their food might be a little bit different than the other kids? We need to, find a way of acknowledging and labelling all of this and how they're communicating this to us, as opposed to just looking at their behaviour where they're being objectionable or they're having meltdowns and stuff like that. So it's all about that thing of they want to know that they're going to be kept safe, and we really need to collaborate with the school teachers and to get the school teachers to collaborate and help our kids feel emotionally safe as well, because then they can get on with the job of learning. If your kids are reading recess and the lunchbox time, and they know, the routines through the class time, they're not concentrating on their classwork because they're, feeling awkward about what's going on. So we need to work that one through, and, that's an area that I'm kind of thinking as you're talking, how can we support our kids in that? Catherine's just popped out, but maybe one of the others can say, do you still do the education sessions with the schools? Yeah. So that's really, really important to make sure that the teachers are on board with it and that the kids in the classroom. Some of our kids don't like to be that kind of stuff to happen, that the other kids in the class know about it. So we've got to support that bit and kind of explore what are the benefits of the kids knowing about it, what are the negatives, and help our kids, because some kids are just, want to go right under the radar. But, go on, yeah.
I think from what I see when I go to see my families, because I see there's about 4 children that I see that are around sort of 12 to 14. That seems to be the worst age for, this is just what they tell me, that they're just embarrassed. That
Adolescence is about fitting in, isn't it?
They've got their lunchbox, and there's 2 girls that go to the same school, and one has enzymes, the other one doesn't. So there's sort of talk comes up along that of why is she doing this and
why
she's
aren't
doing
you?
that.
Yeah, and they just don't have to explain it, do they?
It's a big hassle, and they feel embarrassed and different over that, which it's quite sad sometimes.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's just that's what I'd like to try and find out, a few different ways that they can cope with those sort of things. We give them some ideas, or I give them some ideas, but normally
Paul, do
sort
you
of
do
sneaky
anything with the
ideas.
adults? Do you have adults with CF that kind of go, right, I want to discreetly, like I'm thinking about the kids with diabetes that might need to do things discreetly, or do it up front, it's every kid's going to do it a bit differently, aren't they?
It's a great question. There are some individuals that like to be discreet at work and don't necessarily, they're private people. So we're talking about a very complex thing, I think, with the human personality, and they don't want everyone to know. And there are other people that don't mind. I don't know the answer, like what to do about that. I think that's something that we should be sensitive to and support the individual.
Yeah, like I'm kind of thinking, if they've got to take some enzymes, can they take the enzymes in their pocket and duck off to the toilet with their water bottle and take them? Like that's.
I've said that to one of my girls that I see, and or just go to the toilet and do it, or another one just discreetly does it, goes out to her bag just before, just quickly takes them, and then that works well for them because no one's seeing them now.
And then it's about having, when somebody does ask, is having an answer.
Yeah,
isn't it? It's about having a one sentence answer that will just satisfy the curiosity, because people are just asking out of
Yeah.
curiosity most times, aren't they?
And I think for children it's different because some children can be not nice.
Not nice.
Yeah, so you have to come up with an answer.
Yeah. It's just really short in a sentence. Vanya might have
My
something.
daughter's 16 and a half.
Yeah.
I would say we're really fortunate in this day and age because there are so many kids in classes these days who have stuff. There's
Yeah.
EpiPens around.
Yeah, true.
So my daughter, we were always comforted that, you know, okay, she took pills and stuff, but there are other kids who had stuff in the classroom as well.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps drawing their attention to they're not the only ones who have to do stuff is
Yeah,
really
that's right.
helpful as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Taking them up to the school office where there's
Marina
always-
got really jack of having to answer the questions though.
Yeah.
In the end, she just said, "Oh, they're for dead pigs."
Oh.
Yeah. She got really fed up with it, so I tended to shut them up.
That sentence in
Yeah, might use that one.
But I was just thinking, you know, up at the school office, I'll often have photos of the kids that have got medical
Yeah.
issues. So just, you know, take the kids up there and say, right, don't look too close here, but look at them all. They've all got something
Yeah.
going on, you know.
Or in
so.
the canteen, there's usually photos of them all as well.
I
Just
know
be proud of it.
Yeah.
my daughter's
Yeah, be proud that
Yeah.
Not be scared of it and not be ashamed.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what it is. Like my
Yeah,
eldest
that's
son is 3 and goes, "Mum, why does Bubba have to take medicines?" Because he's awesome, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And my eldest son will tell you, if why does Bubba have to take medicines? My eldest son will pop up now and say, "Because he's wicked."
Yeah.
You know, it's something that you teach your children from the get go to love themselves from the start to finish, for
Yeah.
whatever they have.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is wonderful. Got some other,
I was pretty much going to say the same, and I know that I'm speaking from someone whose daughter is not yet a teenager, so, you know, check back in 10 years and I might be like, But she's almost in year 2, and for her, you know, she has her, even from kindy she could do it herself, so that was just in her lunchbox and she can take them herself at school. But of course all the kids are like, why do you have that every day? And I guess as her mum, I saw it as one of my jobs to equip her with the information and the answers so that age appropriately she had the information to give. She'd just be like, because my stomach works differently to yours, or whatever it was at whatever the age is. And kids are naturally curious. They weren't looking to pummel her. They're just like, why do you have that tablet? She probably would have asked them. So when she had the facts to give and it wasn't emotive or whatever, it was just the info, the kids are like, oh, okay, done deal.
Yep.
And if that, like what this lady was saying too, like if I'm hoping that if by doing that from young and that's normal for her and she's equipped as things go along, then that will help that, because it's really just about it's information, it's a medical thing, like somebody else is a medical thing. And
Just a small, from what I've experienced, there's just a small window there where it's the children that they're proud of themselves, like this lady said, like the children I see, they're brilliant and everything, but there just seems to be a little age gap where it's the
12 to
peer
14
pressure gets in a
year
little
olds.
bit.
Can I
in
say
Because
high
their bodies
school.
are changing as well.
Yeah,
It's,
that's right.
I've got the 13 and the 15-year-old,
Yeah.
and that's what the schools are telling us.
Yeah,
Their bodies are changing,
that's right.
and they're just trying to make themselves as small and unnoticeable as possible, because this is all just so strange. So to have to take, you know, medical things on top of that, just, you know, is overpowering
It does
for
get
them.
too much.
12 to 14 is the change to high school
Yes,
as well,
yeah, that's right.
which is hard.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
it's
Yeah.
hard.
One thing, the side effect of my daughter sounds about the same age as yours. But what I've noticed about the side effect of her being able to talk about the fact she's got cystic fibrosis and she can't absorb fat is that the other kids now are getting educated, because at a young age you can sort of tell the parents, but eventually they just have to sort it out themselves. And the other kids look out for her, so as you know, they sort of know things about her. You know, they'll say, "I've brought my cupcakes to school," you know. Do you know how many enzymes you're going to need and all that stuff. So they actually get educated by equipping your child to tell them about it.
it just becomes normalised, I think.
I think obviously having a preteen myself, like she was fine like that, and now it's different because, and she's happy to talk about her CF, but she's happy to talk about it on a one-on-one basis with her friends. She doesn't want the boys to know, she doesn't want them to know all about every single thing. Yeah,
And that's what Paul was saying. Some
You need
people,
to
you know, want to be a bit more
whatever
private.
their personality is and whatever they want to do.
At whatever phase of life that they're in. Yeah.
Just different things too that you come with the kids.
Alright.
It's time to-
So I did touch on this before about this danger centre, because if you are to go in to get your car and you've left a building and it's a dark car park, you're likely to have a danger centre response if you hear a twig crack over to your right. And all of us respond differently. Some of us will get sweaty palms, sweaty feet, some of us will get our heart start racing, our breathing change. Some of us, our legs will start to move. So that's that fight, flight, fright response. Some kids have that around meal times, around food, around the smells, the sounds, and that might be based on previous experiences. So a lot of the kids that I work with all the time are the children that have either just been born with very marked sensory preferences, or they might have very different sensory preference to their caregiver, or they might have a history of nasogastric tube feeding because of premature birth or because of early medical conditions. They may have had ear, nose and throat infections. They may have had gastroenteritis and vomiting. They may have had reflux, colic, constipation, allergies, the works. So that danger centre response is at an unconscious part of the brain, and it can be the mere bringing of a spoon that sets off a trigger of that fight, flight, fright, freeze response. So we need to think about experience of what's happened and how that's impacted on them and their sensory preferences. For children to develop a love for meal times where they enjoy exploring what is presented to them and trust that it will not be scary, we must be sensitive to their preferences so that we can problem solve through the choices so they can be successful. When we maintain their trust, we can start to stretch them. Never push too fast, always go at their pace. And this takes time, and it's another whole discussion with you. And while we're doing this, it's our job to prepare and it's our child's job to do the eating. So when we know the sensory properties of our child's always foods, we can start to stretch their sometimes food and introduce new foods. So think about the sense properties of the foods that your child will always eat. The sight, how it looks, the smell, the colour, shapes, the smell, the touch, light and deep, on their hands, their face, their mouth, the inside of their body. Well, you know when you haven't eaten much for, quite a number of hours, and you might go and have a hot drink. You can feel that sensation. Now some kids might feel that all the time, regardless. So we've got to think about touch being inside the body as well, and whether that alarms them or whether they like that feeling. Texture, temperature, movement, sound, and with that we can identify foods that they might try because they have sensory properties to what they prefer, and we might talk to them and explain all of that. And so then we go on and we problem solve around all of that, thinking about, remember I said not to use, let our children use value comments around food, yuck, yum, disgusting, nice, whatever. Start using these words. Is it savoury, sweet, bitter, sour, bland, spicy, salty? These are just some words. You'll have lots of other words. The texture, is it smooth, moist, collapsing, dissolving, consistent, fizzy, chewy, crunchy? Touch, thinking about how it goes with their, what's it like here, what's it like on their lips, the temperature, hot, cold, warm, frozen, icy. Some children will eat frozen vegetables and frozen fruit, but they won't eat it when it's cooked. Now, what's that to do with? Is it to do with the texture? Is it to do with the taste? Or is it to do with the smell? Some kids won't eat eggs warm or hot, but they will eat a cold hard-boiled egg. So what's that all about? Is it about the mouthfeel? Is it about the smell? It can be about all of those things or one of those things. So thinking about smell and how does that impact on your child. I remember an incident where I put a new herb in a casserole when my kids were little, and when I say new, one that I hadn't kind of used in her whole life of through 2 or 3 years. Anyway, she walked through the door, and this casserole was cooking, and she said, "Yuck, what's that dreadful smell?" And I thought, right, what have I done differently? And I thought, okay, it's got to be that herb. So I went outside and stayed outside for a little while, and then came back in, and I went, yeah, okay, I can smell. That's a new smell. She's never smelled it in her life before. So to her, it was disgusting. Now, what did I say? Did I say, oh, it's the new herb in the casserole that's cooking tonight that we're going to eat for dinner? No, I didn't say that. I said, I wonder what it is. Why don't I go outside and come back in and see if I can smell it, and we can discover together what it is. So, of course, when I walked back in and I figured out what it was, because I thought initially it might be something at the front door, so when I figured that it was to do with what was cooking, I just pretended at that stage that I didn't quite know where it was coming from, and I said, right, okay, if you want to go off and keep playing, I'll try and discover what it is. So, then try and discover what it is, but I didn't want to alarm her that it was something to do with what we're going to eat tonight. And the interesting thing was that there was a stage in that casserole while that smell was really strong, and then it wasn't strong anymore. And so then it came to the table, it was all right. And so then I started to think about that. And when you cook meat, there's a stage in the cooking of the meat where there is a very different smell that comes around. For some kids that might be alarming and put them right off the meal, because they don't understand that smell is going to change, that the taste of the food is going to change. It's alarming enough to have made them say that's enough. So we're going to think about all those things to support our kids with that.
Did she eat the casserole?
She did. No, never. Our kids don't need to know everything. They're kids, we're the adults. Okay, we've got flies going around here. Now, there's just another little thing I want to show you here. Right, does anyone know how I'm going to get this? Oh, here we go. I want to do a slide
F5.
show. Oh, there it is. Okay, now here come. In the beginning. Oh, I've got it. Thank you. Sorry, every screen a little bit different, isn't it? Okay, so then that brings me to sensational mealtimes. So the big question we ask about our book, did people see it at the back there? Yeah. Somebody wants to just, yeah, there we go. There it is, sensational mealtimes. What's that all about? So we had a wonderful graphic designer, so Gillian and I, the occupational therapists that I connected with, people were asking us, please support us, we want to be able to find out how to do this. So these beautiful critters that she designed, the graphic designer did, to illustrate what's going on. Because we were working with kids whose parents would say, won't eat fruit or vegetables, overstuffs, only eat food in packets, turns food over and over and over, before puts it near the mouth, some wouldn't even put it by the mouth, only eats white food, a whole gamut of different things. And so I'm going to recap very quickly on some of the things I've shared with you, remembering that what might influence child and parents' mealtimes is to do with their genes, how we're born. We've all got different sensory preferences, and those sensory preferences can be challenging, they can be anxiety provoking. The sensory experiences that we have, so I listed those off before, didn't I? That those early hospitalisations, developmental issues, pain, trauma, distress, and a lot of the CF kids, if they've had things happening here around chest infections and the ear, nose and throat, how does that impact on their whole experience and also how their gut's feeling? Sensory preferences are determined by an individual's genes and their experiences. And this is what happens. It influences what they detect, what they tolerate, what they seek more of because a lot might feel like a little to them, or what they avoid because a little feels like a lot. Or they might be distracted by it, or they might actually be distressed by it. Recapping on what are the sensory preferences, all those types of things. And so that brings us to this whole thing, is that it's not just cut and dry, black and white, here it is. If you're sensitive in one sensory preference, you're sensitive to all of them. You're at different parts of the spectrum. You can change with time, change with age, change with the interactions and the surroundings. And so we've got this whirlpool happening. all the time. So just when we think we're figuring our kids out, something might happen and it changes. So just being mindful that the smells and the sounds, the sights, the touch, the temperatures, the taste, the textures, the mouth and the whole body is experiencing it. And that can affect feelings and can affect food acceptance. Sensational mealtimes provides us with a way to nurture the interactions that are happening in our family by increasing our understandings about the impact of sensory preferences, because we recognise that mealtime difficulties can cause a whole bunch of negative feelings, and they can be in the caregiver, but they can equally be in some children. And what happens is, what we know from neuroscience is that feelings are often mirrored between people, between caregiver and child, child and caregiver, and other family members. Okay, if you've had a pretty relaxing day today and you're been with a bunch of really nice people here at CFWA, and you go and pick up your kids from school, and somebody jumps into the car and they're like, how long does it take for you to start, your feelings to start to change? Yeah? You've gone from this, to, you start to pick up on their feelings, don't you? You start to feel similar to them. And think about that when it comes to how you feel if you have got those negative feelings when you're getting food, meal times ready, getting food ready, and you come to the table with either bother, frustration, anxiety, distress, whatever it might be, and your child joins you at some point, they're likely to pick up on your feelings. They start feeling those same feelings, because that's what mirror neurons do. They don't know why they feel like they feel. They're kids. And they might think it's got something to do with what they can see. And so they're having that unconscious danger centre response because they've picked up on the feelings of the people around them. So in amongst this whole thing around sensational mealtimes and mealtime difficulties, it is so important that we look after how we're feeling. We need to do things to make sure we come to the mealtime table. So if it's not you that, if you don't have mealtime difficulties but you have family or friends that do, it's really important for them to find ways, and we explain it, all the different people that can support them, to think about how they're feeling when they come to the table. Now, what some parents will tell me, and I can remember back to the 90s when I was working with families, is that a lot of parents have this whole thing from the hospitals and the health professionals about this expectation of the weigh-in, of how their child's going at the weigh-in. And so there's this whole feeling of being judged, and so with that we can carry some big feelings with that, and it's important that we recognise that those big feelings might be really impacting on our relationship around food and mealtimes and our kids, because we have this fight, flight, fright, freeze response, and it can depress appetite for minutes or hours. It might be associated with the sensory properties of the food, but it can be about the surroundings and the interactions that we're having with people, and have a large impact on mealtime behaviour and the success of a family mealtime. So, sensational mealtimes differs from other books because we go in and look at sensitive caregiving and sensory preferences. It's got lots of charts in it to help you explore the mealtime sensory preference of those of all the family. Think about what you prefer, what do you avoid, and how do your sensory preferences influence your mealtimes in your family. What are the same? What are different? What concern and conflict does it create? What do you both avoid? What does one avoid, one likes? And how does this influence all the family? And to figure out how can we do one meal to suit the whole family. During meal times we use every sense to help us notice, be calm, interact with others, socialise, be seated. Think about, do you have a favourite seat to sit in at the table? Do our kids have a favourite seat? if our kids are disruptive and moving and all that kind of stuff, that can be for a whole bunch of reasons, but also wondering if it can be, if they sit in a different seat, does that have a different impact on how they feel? We continually use our senses to gather sensory information from our surroundings and our body, and when we understand the impact of our sensory experiences in the past and current, we can use the book to ensure our meal times can be emotionally safe, successful and enjoyable for everyone in our family. We've done a couple of journal articles to, we evaluated the book and that, so they're there as well. We have a website, so that's got the details of how people can access some support around sensational meal times, and we're just wanting people to spread the word because there's so many resources out there that say these are the rules and this is what you do and you do this and you'll have a successful eater. What we know is that every family is unique, every child is unique, and we need to gather some understanding so that we can problem solve through what's going to work best for your family, because no one right way. And I thought it was really lovely when we were talking about that thing of how do you deal with the school situation. Could you see just how many different responses and ways and things to do? And that's the real thing to capitalise on, is that there's no one right way. There's a whole bunch of possibilities, ideas, and what we need to do is to join all those bits together and then understand the uniqueness of our child, the uniqueness of our relationship, our uniqueness of our family system, to then go, what's going to work for us? And what works for us today might not work for us tomorrow, so then we'll keep gathering. And we need to have our support networks around us, because the gathering of information to support our children can be quite exhausting at times. And so I hope that with what I've presented today, you'll recognise that there's some other bits and pieces of information out there. In our book, we've got like a further reading section as well as the bibliography at the very back, but the further reading. And there's some lovely stuff that Gillian talks about with some of the titles are how to raise, how a deeper understanding of yourself helps you raise children that thrive. And so, there's just some really helpful bits and pieces there in amongst all of that. Now, what I'd like to do in this last little bit is kind of think about some of the questions that this has brought up for you. Some of the questions that were raised at the very beginning of when I started to do my bit, and some of the questions that were on the survey that was done before, and to go from there. Does anyone have any burning thought in their mind that they want to?
How much is the book?
$40. Yep, I've got some here if anyone wants one particularly today. And also I've given you the card so you can order them online as well. So if you order them online, there's postage and handling as well. Any questions? Or shall we go back over the ones that you said before? And does anyone have that? Catherine, you have that list of bits there as well?
It was mostly covered with all of those questions, so yeah.
Okay,
The
so
details, so it was all covered.
all right, all
Yep.
covered?
Yep.
All right, so if I go back and some little notes I jotted down from what some of you had said, I'll see if, I'll ask you if I've answered it. So what one person was saying about the overeating, I think it was you, yeah. Okay, so, and Paul, come on, do you want to come on forward? Because you might have questions for Paul as well that this has stimulated other things from the morning session. So people don't have to turn their neck too badly. So,
I think I've got more questions for them.
yeah, all good, all right, well, we've got some time, haven't we? So, Louisa?
Yes,
is it?
Louise,
Yes,
yeah.
Louise. So, sensation, yeah? And how much control? So what we know from research is parents who control what their children eat, particularly, so I'm thinking it's in the overweight, obesity kind of research that's there.
Yeah.
They say that parents who are more controlling over portion size, the children perhaps do keep eating more than what, because they sense that there's going to be a cut-off. So they might increase the rate at which they eat to try and make sure they're not, and they might sneak food because they don't want to get told off. It is such a problem because our society is all about consumerism and consumption. And our lives are such that we don't move as much as what we used to move, and so we don't burn up like we used to. So we've just got so much food available all the time, and we're just not burning it up. So it's a problem in our society.
I think the problem's me more than her. After I
Such a
talk.
mother.
I've had a long-term weight problem, which I'm getting under control, but I'm worried that she's going to be going the same way.
Yeah.
I've actually had weight loss surgery,
Yeah.
so, and I think that's what I panic about when I see her, what I think is too much,
Yeah.
because I think she's going to be following in my footsteps.
Right.
So
And that
I
is a
don't.
big thing, isn't it, that we carry as parents,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, you know, the other adult that we might share the house with comes with their early experiences as well.
Yeah.
And then that impacts on what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I guess it's in education. There might be things that you can impart from an education point of view.
Yes, which
to
we
her.
are actually working on.
And then
So
she's
it's-
still responsible for what goes on in
That's
here,
right,
isn't it?
which
Yeah.
me and my husband have said to her, she is actually at an age as well where she's got to take some responsibility of what she chooses from the cupboard when no one's around.
Yes.
Even if it is a healthy food for her,
Yes.
it's still the quantity.
Yes. Yes.
But
And another thing is that might be helpful here is to understand why do we eat. We eat because we are tummy hungry, but we also eat because we are mouth hungry. And this gets into the sensory type of thing as well. If we are tired, many of us will seek to eat because chewing stimulates us and can arouse us. And so we've got to think about why are we eating if it's because we're tired. We might eat out of boredom because there's nothing else to do and the food tastes nice and we love to eat. Another reason why people might seek food is because they actually are getting dehydrated. They don't recognise that they need to drink. Drinking sufficient water is a downfall of many Australians. I also spend a day working with the other end of life of elderly people as well, and it's really interesting.
They don't drink.
They hardly drink anything, and particularly the older men. So, yeah, in amongst it all, for their medical condition, they actually need to drink more. And when they start to drink more, a funny thing they say, I feel a bit better. Yeah. So I'm drinking more water. So teaching our kids that there are some things they need to think about when they're seeking food when they probably don't need food. And that is it that, you know, go off and have a glass of water and come back in an hour, half an hour, and then we'll think about it. Because, yeah, we need to drink plenty of water. And the other one is, are we tired? Maybe we should go to bed, you know? Maybe we should go and have a lay down. Because they just might be seeking food to stimulate themselves, yeah? And so a rest and a read of the book might be sufficient to do that for them. Then think about how big is your stomach? That's another good one. How big's your stomach? Clench your fist, put it here. That's about how big your stomach is. Like I said before, it's a balloon and it can stretch a bit. Some people's are much smaller than that. So maybe we can use our fist, her fist, and put it on the table and say, once the food is all chewed up and, you know, some foods have got more water in them than other foods, and so we're talking about the solid mass, that's about enough food. And we only need to have something about, when we're older, about every 3 hours or so. So get your portion sizes down. Yeah? Then we had the other side was the ones that don't go looking for food, okay? We have an expression, some people live to eat. Who lives to eat? Put your hand up. Yeah, love food. And some of us just eat to live. Really not fast at all. Now, that creates some difficulties in families. And then if you've got a child with cystic fibrosis who only eats to live, from that expression of the general public, but we know, that we need to make them as nourished as possible. It's really tricky, doesn't it? Because food just does nothing for them. But what we might need to think about is maybe they might be someone that's got a low registration of sensory experiences. I know I'm saying some of them and I'm wondering about this. What if we were to really zap up the sensory experiences of their food and discover a bit more? So it might be that, I'm thinking with the kids that I work with, some of them will say to me, oh, they like olives, or they like the smoked salmon that my husband eats occasionally that I find disgusting. Or they like, and they'll say something else, but the parent actually doesn't ever offer them that food because they see it as an adult food. But wonder if we can zap up some of the blander foods and add more sensory properties to it, and they might be a bit more interested in it. So, chilies might go all right, curries and whatnot, all those different flavours. So some of our kids, they might be the ones that suck lemons. And so being able to dip food in, freshly squeezed lemon juice or vinegar or, sweet chilli sauce or something like that actually provides them with the sensory experience that they're looking for in a food. Or temperature, or crunch, or smoothness. So it's also wondering about that bit as well. The ones that we're talking about, the underseekers, did you want to elaborate any more, or do you think you've got enough information? So just it's offering them food, but don't inundate them with food. Energy boosters, did you go through that, where you can add in extra kilojoules to the food so they don't have to eat more bulk of food, but can add in the margarine, the avocado, the oil, the mayonnaise, the cream cheese, just so they don't have to eat more food, add those calories in. We talked about the time, didn't we? Yeah, I think I've covered those ones that I jotted down. Anybody have a question for Paul?
Or a question, or a question for Denise. There were a couple of questions that I got asked that I said let's give that to Denise.
Okay.
Yours was a good one, which I found challenging. Your example, your situation.
Well, that fact that she doesn't like the things that she doesn't like cheese. She doesn't like breads. She doesn't like. I suppose I'm really struggling because I find. I went to naturopath and I give her a Weetabix in the morning, but I give her lots of cream. But he was quite upset, well, you should really be giving her cheese, some nuts, because she's got very a high sort of gastro problem at night. So it's,
Okay.
I find it very challenging.
So yeah, look, it sounds really difficult. So when we talked about enzymes today, did that help you?
No, I can match fat really easily.
Yeah.
It's more the, I suppose there's lots of data out there for parents. I mean, I went on to look for, say, a CF menu, an ideal CF menu for a week, say. But all the recipes were mainly American, which of course in America the amount of fat, and lots of the menu had stuff that I wouldn't have any idea of what kind of food that was.
I find that I've looked at some of their foods and some of it looks good and some of it seems weird to me. It's American tastes.
Yeah. So
cream cheese in whatever, fried and crumbed.
Like jelly and peanut butter. I mean, she would never eat that.
I don't know, they just seem unusual, but it's cultural, isn't it? So
she doesn't like, she doesn't really like bread. I mean, they tested her for celiac. So I suppose it's trying to get, during the holiday, I try to feed her every 2 hours to try and get the 2 to 3 enzymes a day. And I find that, she's
Taxing and tiresome and...
do you have access to the dietitian at PMH?
Well, the dietitian...
They're not very helpful.
No,
The
they're not.
dietitians
So
aren't
maybe
great
I
at
can have a
PMH.
chat with you at the end. It's a bit
I
hard.
find the dietitian at PMH, I mean, it was,
They change
don't give them vegetables because they have
change
their own Vitabtech. No, but she doesn't food, so it's kind of like, well, when you meet her, give her vegetables. So then, of course, she's sitting next to me and hearing this.
Yeah.
So it's a constant.
So one of the things that I would suggest is that I work with people who are really sick, so I work with people who have no appetite. So one of the side effects of being sick is that you lose your appetite. And one of the things that I was also thinking about is that, you know, you grow up with a high-fat diet, and you have to have high-fat diet, and you have to eat, you have to eat, and there's all this focus and pressure on eating. And we don't like to be told what to do. I don't know about you, but you know, I want to know everything, and I want to be the boss. I want to rule the world, actually. So you know, you put a kid. I'm joking, but you put a kid in that situation, and they tend to want to do the opposite, right? So we did that, and now we see our kids doing that. So that requires some tact and some wisdom, and I think we have to be able to back off sometimes. So you obviously really care, and we all do. And look, I have to say that I really appreciate everyone coming here today because you do care about nutrition and the health. So what I would say is that a little bit of food is better than none. So, you know, dietitians, and I could do this. I could get my calculator out, and you need this much, and that's what you need. But you know, they're currently eating this much or this much. So say it's energy or protein. Well, if I can get them to get to there, that's better. That's an improvement. And so I would, you know, try giving them the things that they like, and whether that's fruits or vegetables and not with the fat. And then, you know, it's difficult, your situation, but I would try, I think the idea of milkshakes or fruit juices, so they can have a lot of calories, and you can nourish someone with those. So a little bit of carbohydrate and protein would be really important. So whether that's eggs or potato or pasta or rice, that's going to keep you going until you can solve this problem. But I've got a feeling that I would really like to think that you would have access to a doctor who would say to the dietitian, you need to fix this, or address this, or improve this, or, you know, this patient needs a review. And when it comes from the doctor, it tends to come with a lot more weight. But it sounds to me like, so I think she needs some more fluid and fibre intake. I think that the enzymes aren't quite right, and that's not your fault. It's just that sometimes it needs a review and a pair of fresh eyes. And when you're blocked up and have constipation, then you won't want to eat, because what you eat is going nowhere. And that cystic fibrosis is complex.
Well, it is. I mean, she's obviously on Clearlax on a daily basis.
Okay.
And it's always, I mean, last year I realised now I was overdosing her on Clearlax because I felt, oh, she needs to poo every day, Now I've kind of realised in this year that actually she can go 2-3 days without a poo and still be all right. I mean, yes, she has been hospitalised twice for severe constipation.
Yeah.
But I've now realised, and I'm forever, I suppose, I'm always looking at her poo.
How old is she?
She's 12. So I look at her, and now I'm sort of getting, in the mornings she wakes up, she's full of gas at night, her stomach is out here, she's in pain, she goes to bed like 11, 12.
Okay.
I'll feel her tummy in the morning because I feel it's the flattest, if you know, and I can feel if I need to increase the Clearlax, because the problem is, of course, you're increasing the Clearlax and it makes her get cramps.
Yeah.
And be in more severe pain, which is what I was doing last year.
Did this get worse recently? Has this got worse in the last couple of years?
Oh yeah, definitely. I wasn't even
Yeah.
giving her. I wasn't even giving her.
Do you think that she's always having the enzymes when you're not supervising?
Oh, definitely. I mean, she would, if she wasn't having enzymes, she's really religious at enzymes.
Yeah.
But if she wasn't, she'd be. If she doesn't, it wheeze. I mean, it is real, just pure fat that comes out,
Okay.
and she's in terrible pain. So she's definitely knows.
So she doesn't like bread?
No.
No. Does she
Doesn't
drink,
like the taste of bread.
Does she drink milk?
No.
Yeah.
Does she have potato?
She loves potatoes. So I
Do you
give
know
her
that you
fried
can put
potatoes.
do sweet potato, throw
Yeah.
egg in there as well, that helps
Doesn't
with
like
the
eggs.
fats. If you mix it up, you actually don't taste it in the potatoes at all.
What do you mean by?
So when you mash your potato, when you
Doesn't
put
like
your
mash? She likes
Yeah, when
fried
you put your milk
potatoes.
in the
I'll
butter,
take potato
throw it in.
rings. I'll make fried potato rings. That's almost what she has daily. On a daily basis, she'll have.
Does she like
fri-
crumbed food?
She'll have schnitzel. She likes soft. She doesn't like to chew.
Yeah.
She doesn't like steak.
So
She
sometimes,
has chicken schnitzel and mince. That's her kind of like.
look, it sounds really challenging. I've got a feeling that there's an underlying problem that is not being dealt with.
Yeah, I mean,
And it may not even be, so,
the night time, I think the pain at night.
I think she gets anxious, doesn't she?
Well,
at
I don't
night, is
know.
what you said.
I don't know about if that's the overriding, but I think the pain overnight thing has probably, yeah.
I would, I think that so cooking skills is something that we could probably all benefit from, because it sounds like you all have a great challenge in making food palatable.
Well, the thing is
And-
now
and-
she's 29, she's 12, she's 28 kilos,
Yeah,
and she's 140 centimeters, so she's small.
yeah.
And she's obviously low BMI, and they were thinking of
Yeah,
putting that in. But now she should really then be, if I look at that, on 28 enzymes a day. Well, I'm struggling to give her 20.
yeah.
And
And look, that's okay. So we're matching the enzymes with the food. So if you're not eating, you don't take enzymes, or if you're eating less, you take less enzymes.
Mm.
So that's okay.
Mm.
Sometimes it's not ideal, but it's permissive to have less than your adequate nutrition. Right. And we're hoping that that's for a period of time until a temporary situation resolves, that then it can improve in the long term. Okay.
Mm.
So I'm thinking that there's an underlying, something we're missing, or an underlying problem that's not being addressed.
Have you had a consult with the gastroenterologists at all?
We see them every 3 months.
You do see them, and
I mean, basically, the conversation is just how much pain, has been going, or she's still in pain at night. And they're
Yeah.
just,
do they? Has anyone talked about FODMAPs at all? The carbohydrate intolerances.
So they've excluded celiac disease, haven't they? And you don't, yeah,
So celiac disease is to a protein that's in wheat,
Yeah.
rye, barley, oats and triticale, and then there's another thing that can be carbohydrate intolerance. So sometimes that runs in families.
And it
Do
sounds-
you know anyone else in the family that gets gaseous at all from foods? No, in an extended family?
So
No?
it's not
So-
uncommon in girls, and it's quite common actually. It's becoming so, when you are intolerant to these foods, you develop an aversion to them. So,
Well, that's what
so you
that's
say, I
why
don't like it. I don't like the taste. I don't like, because that's how you express it. But and it causes bloating. And what it's about is it's very similar. In fact, it's a chameleon, and it mimics enzyme. Being incorrect or inappropriate, or so, because you get bloating. So certain carbohydrates pass through the small intestine into the large intestine, are fermented, and that causes gas and bloating. So that's a possibility, and that's worth looking at. And so
Yeah, it's a tricky one because you've got to go, people with cystic fibrosis are people to start with, so they are just as prone to any other thing that
Oh,
anybody else can
absolutely,
get.
yeah.
Plus,
Because
yeah,
you've got CF,
but
it
the
gets.
needs- it gets put into just the enzyme. So it could be to do with the enzyme stuff, but it could be to do with something else. And I guess that's the thing, is to be able to explore that and say you can't test for it. You actually have to eliminate all the potentials and then start to and see whether you get
But I mean,
symptoms regularly.
obviously I tend to, like what she doesn't like to eat, she doesn't like to eat.
Yeah.
I mean, I
So yeah.
I don't force.
No, you can't. I think your what you experience is huge and needs more individual time to kind of explore all of those bits, because, you know, we need to kind of look at what is she eating, what's the amount, do food diaries and to do that big exploration. So, I mean, I can connect with you at the end today, because, you know, there's a whole bunch of possibilities, but we kind of need to know all the history of what's to kind of pinpoint and help you explore and problem solve what might be the next thing. So, whew, big. You know, and a lot of us have those big feelings, don't we, around where things don't go and trying to find the right people to partner with and support us. And I think it's great the CFWA is available to kind of get in other thoughts and other opinions and all that kind of stuff as well. So, you know, I'm available privately. I'm not going to be doing the CF type stuff. It'll be more me as a general dietitian going, these are the possibilities, and then you connecting back with your team to kind of go, okay, what's going to work here and there. You know, I mean, that's the other thing. If it can be through the CFWA, that's another, you know, potential possibility. Because as parents and caregivers, you're kind of trying to bring all the bits of info to kind of say, okay, what's going on for my particular situation here. Real tricky, real tricky. Did anyone else have any other bits you want to comment on, or Paul might have? Yeah.
I've got a question. Because of all the medication the kids take, does that mean that their sense of taste is different?
Yeah. Is it, you know?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Isn't
My son
it?
drank a whole bottle of hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So
Yeah, got very bad.
What?
Yeah.
Well, for instance, my daughter, she's 16. She has not eaten fruit since she stopped having pureed apple with a crayon in it. She will not eat it. She just won't. She absolutely won't.
and there's a bit of a learned aversion there, isn't there? And,
So she will have,
hopefully
she's
that.
okay with veggies, but she
Yeah.
just will not eat fruit. And I've discussed this with a gastroenterologist, and they said, it was Kathy Muse, she said if she's eating veggies, I wouldn't worry about it
Yeah.
too much.
So there
And
are
I've just told her to fall in
children,
love with
there
the
are
vegetables.
adults in the general public who do not eat fruit. Okay, so we've got to go, I've got a child, and whatever happens out in the general public can happen to them, and then we think about the cystic fibrosis permutations on all of that. So as Vanya was saying, is it to do with her early experiences, what she's been subjected to? Is it to do with the cystic fibrosis, or is it to do with just her? So we don't know. We don't know the answer to that. But there is that possibility of shaping and understanding and exploring with her, and as she becomes older, we can wonder with her about smelling, looking, touching, because one day he or she might be the food preparer for others. And remember I said your sensory preferences create the lens through which you see the rest of the world. So if somebody doesn't like a particular group of food, so we'll take fruit for example here, it might be that it is just so abhorrent to them that they don't prepare it for the other people in the family. And so then they miss out on that experience. So we have to kind of explore that one through and say, okay, what is it, how can we grade it up to get the body used to? Because one day, when you're a bit older, you might develop
Taste
a
does
tolerance
change.
for.
Well, that's what we've told her. I mean, we just decided
But,
we're working
yeah,
out.
that's
no-
it.
it's no
So
use.
it's when they're prepared to go through the smelling, kissing, licking, and allow that to happen for the usual 10 to 20 times, but for them it might be the 30, the 40, the 50, the 60, to then eventually develop a tolerance, a like, and maybe it will only ever stay at a tolerance, maybe it'll move to a like, but for some it might eventually, like we were saying, a decade ago we perhaps weren't eating some of the foods that we are eating now, might love them. So it's that thing of, if you don't have the exposure, if you don't have the just right exposure, so that your danger centre isn't triggered, it's a just right exposure done at your pace, you may never stretch and develop.
I would say it sounds like a learned aversion. When I was younger,
She's pretty adamant.
yeah, and I think we should choose our battles,
Mm.
and probably fruit, we could just choose that battle later. But a lot of taste is related to our smell, and in a respiratory disease that can be reduced because of sinusitis, having a respiratory exacerbation with mucus in your airways, that can reduce your sense of smell and reduce your taste. But it sounds like she has chosen, learned aversion not to eat fruit, and has chosen not to, and that may change later. So as she gets older and her friends go to the juice bars and she's with her friends and they're having some new fruit that she's never had before, she might try it and love it, hopefully.
Okay.
But with that high amount of salt intake, do you, in your opinion, would you think that would change anything?
Yeah.
Because my son, oh my god, the things that he eats, I just, ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh. How could you even do that? He will literally just eat a whole thing of butter, just like this.
Yeah. Because
Oh, it's
a
disgusting.
lot to him feels like a little, because he's got used to this. Yeah.
Sorry if this question was asked this morning because I couldn't make it this morning, but with probiotics, if your child is on like prophylactic antibiotics or azithromycin, is there a benefit to continual probiotics, or is the antibiotics just going to kill whatever you put in them anyway?
So the different antibiotics will reduce the good bacteria in your bowel. So the broad spectrum antibiotics seem to have the most effect. And azithromycin, is not necessarily going to do that. It's more like where you're having the two broad spectrum antibiotics when you're in hospital. And at that time, you might want to consider a probiotic for the period of time that you're having the antibiotics. And that may help, it may or may not, but it probably won't hurt, but it may help reduce diarrhoea from antibiotic associated diarrhoea. And I recommend a week or two after the hospital antibiotic treatment that you have some probiotics. But a healthy diet with some yogurt and some fibre in your diet, fruits and vegetables and grains, will ensure, do what we can, to maintain a healthy colonic flora.
What about for like Toby podhalers and clostridiums?
Yeah, so most of it, very little of it gets to the gut, and that's where the damage is done. I would say that it's the things like the tazocin and meropenem, and there are specific antibiotics, clindamycin, that really devastate the gut bacteria. And that can increase your risk of bacterial overgrowth and very bad bacteria. So there's one called C. diff, and that can make you very, very sick. So probiotics may help prevent that problem happening. So I recommend probiotics.
Do you have a particular type of probiotic that you recommend?
Well, it's really, really good question. Any companies want to make a donation to CFWA? Talking to the video. Because of what I have available in the hospital, I use what I use, only because it's available. But there's some evidence that a dual probiotic, so two probiotics is better than none. So there are some tablets with two types of good bacteria in it. And there is evidence that with fibre, it's more beneficial and more effective. there is a specific probiotic called Saccharomyces boulardii, which has good evidence for the prevention of recurrence of C. diff. But it's a huge topic. There's a lot of information.
There you go.
And I mean, this is all a huge topic, isn't it? We probably just scratched the surface today, really. But there was recently a meta-analysis, so a new analysis of all of the evidence for probiotics. And what they did, instead of having this probiotic at this dose, so the evidence for this probiotic at this dose for this condition, and this probiotic for this condition, they put them all together under the assumption that they all work on the same benefit. And then when they did that, they found a much higher level of evidence for the benefit of probiotics in reducing antibiotic-associated diarrhea and prevention of C. diff. So the reason that they hadn't had that stronger evidence before was because they separated all the different types of probiotics and the ways that people take them and the dose. So this is my go-to rationale. Relatively speaking, I mean, out of your and my pocket, it's expensive, at, $1 a tablet or whatever it is. But to the hospital system, so while you're in hospital, it's so cheap compared to antibiotics and a hospital bed and the cost of the nursing and the doctors and so from a healthcare dollar point of view, it's inexpensive relatively. Likely won't hurt at all and may help. So on those principles, and all of my patients, I say, would you like it? And they almost always say yes. So they feel better about, we care about their diarrhea, so their diarrhea from antibiotics. We care about them while they're in hospital, we offer it to them. So I think that that's all worth doing for those reasons.
And the nurses probably like you because the smell doesn't happen as much.
And it can reduce thrush, and it can reduce, problems that people get with antibiotics, diarrhea.
Is it like the supermarket ones, like Yakult and stuff like that?
Yeah, so in the hospital, through the kitchen, I have Yakult available, which through the computer I can just order it for the patients. Not everyone likes the milky yogurt drinks, or they just don't like the taste. I love it. It's sour, sweet, it's amazing. You can make a donation to CFWA, promoting all these products. But then there's a tablet, and we just use what's on tender, and it's basically an acidophilus. And we only use that because it doesn't have to be refrigerated, and some of them have to be refrigerated because they're a live bacteria.
So things like yogurt?
Yogurt's good. Yogurt contains healthy bacteria, acidophilus and different types. They're just in a much smaller dose than the tablet. So some of the tablets are like, billion colony forming units or whatever.
The fact that yogurts are now
I don't know who counted them, but someone did.
Isn't the fact that now yogurts are high in sugar that the bacteria feeds off the sugar, so you kind of contradicting yourself using your everyday play kind of yogurt, which has the fruit, which has the added sugar, which is 98% fat free instead of added little sugar. You're feeding the bacteria at the same time?
I prefer full fat yogurt. So
it's harder to find full fat yogurt now.
Really hard, and there's a marketing advantage to making a health claim on a product. So we know that if there's two health products that are the same, and one of them says low food additives, people will buy that one. If it's low fat, they'll buy that one. If it's low sugar, if it's low GI, if it's low salt, they'll buy that one. So the yogurt manufacturers embraced that, and as a marketing advantage, they made yogurts low fat, low sugar, no fat. I mean, so yogurt is a product that is an emulsion that contains fat and liquid and protein and other goodies. It's an amazing product. If you could invent yogurt tomorrow, you'd be a genius and a millionaire. I mean, it's an amazing product. I think the person who invented it should be a saint. But yogurt has 3 to 4% fat. Full fat yogurt, like Brown's yogurt, which tastes quite nice, has 3 to 4% fat. That is a low fat product. That is a healthy product for anybody. So full fat yogurts are not bad and unhealthy and high fat dangerous foods. So what they do when they make the other yogurts, they took the fat out, they put in gum, and then they put in sugar to give it a creamy mouthfeel, because that's what nice yogurt is like. And it ends up at about actually the same kilojoules. So putting the sugar in brings the calorie energy content to be the same. So even my heart patients, I say, look, enjoy yogurt. I don't say don't have yogurt.
Because it's not like eating a bag of chips that has no other nutritional value. Yogurt has calcium in it, it has the probiotics in
We
it,
give
it
it
has
to
the right, of the whole works. Now we're getting close to 2, so do people need to go or?
I think we'd just like to say our appreciation to you all for coming.
Yeah?
Thanks very much.
Yeah,
And I'll go down the back if anyone wants to buy a book or talk to me.
fantastic.